slip through here.
Well, I really want to take a minute to thank Sister Joanne and Sister Rosemary for inviting me back to have a show here in this very special place. I have such warm memories of being here 10 years ago doing a show that I was just so thrilled to have a chance to come back and share some more tree work. Because yes, it never ends. I don't really ever see an end of me working with trees as my topic, because it just feels like I have so much left that needs to be said. As Sister Joanne mentioned, I'm also an arts educator, and so you're going to have to be in class for a couple of minutes here, so be patient with me. I like to take people a little bit through the process. I think, unfortunately, a lot of us are terrified of the arts and going to gallery spaces and trying to figure out how we're supposed to act and what we're supposed to wear, and we can't touch the work, we have to stand a certain distance away from it, and I really feel that that approach does a disservice to artists, and my approach has always been very different, and that I try to explain my process as much as I can to people so that the work becomes accessible and understandable, because you're not going to always know what I was thinking of when you touch something, and I think sometimes it brings more meaning to the piece when you can suddenly get a little bit of what my process was. And certain things that are included on a piece might suddenly make sense, where before maybe they seemed very random. And why is this here? When if you can hear my voice, it brings some authenticity to what you probably were already thinking, and kind of validates what you think is happening. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of history about how I arrived here, because there are some key things that play a big role in the work that is on exhibit today. I think I was always an artist. This was me with my cousin up at a camp that we used to go to when we were kids, and we were on our stomachs coloring. It's not visible in the picture, but I was probably also advising her what colors to use, how to embellish her work. Because as I said, not only have I been this artist, but I've been an arts educator pretty much my whole life. And my life went along, and it was wonderful, and really I couldn't imagine anything different. And then I had a bike accident, and it was a traumatic head injury. And I was really lucky. I was actually in extremely good shape at that point because I used to ride a lot. I was kind of fanatical about it. And so my physical injuries were minor. But what happened is that the head injury is what ended up being the more serious thing I had to contend with. And quite frankly, it took me months to even figure out that this was something that I was going to have to be dealing with. So what I want to do right now is I want to read a little excerpt from a book that I actually just finished self-publishing to kind of give you some context before we move on. I'm picking up where I've just described being in the hospital, and they've asked for my contact information. Recalling those few basic pieces of information would take several hours and involve locating my cracked bicycle helmet, which luckily had all of my contact information written across it in permanent marker. The nurse explained to me that the difficulty I was having with recalling information was not uncommon for a person with a head injury, such as mine, and that with a bit of rest, my symptoms would most likely diminish. Within a week, my muscles had healed, and on the surface I looked fine. But it became more and more apparent to me that the one thing that still wasn't completely healed was my brain. Once an avid reader, I suddenly found it difficult to get through a single paragraph of the New York Times. I also could not remember where anything was in my apartment. In the scheme of things, these were minor inconveniences. Opening every kitchen cupboard door to find a cup or a bowl and setting aside, rather than reading the Sunday Times when I arrived, were annoyances that I could handle for the few remaining weeks of summer vacation. Soon I would be back in my art room teaching, and the lazy days of recuperating and swinging in the hammock would be over. I was sure that everything would be fine by then. It is amazing how naive we are at times. Thankfully, my nervousness about getting back on a bicycle, coupled with the fact that mine would need several repairs before it could be rideable, meant that I had to find a new form of exercise. It was at this point in my recovery that I began walking and that I rediscovered trees. The trees that I would encounter on my walks would, and still do, teach me about resilience, healing, patience, and so much more. Sucking a lot. And trying to come to terms with what this new person was. They really just gave me so much. And I found that I had to respond to them in some way. Up till the point of the accident, I really had not been working with trees. I'd been working kind of all around on all different topics. Cows, I did cows for a long time. And I worked in a lot of different media. And always liked my work, but I was definitely bouncing around. I hadn't really found a home with my work, I guess. And after the accident, and after I started spending so much time and gaining so much from them, that's when the groove kind of happened, and I started finding things. And what was really interesting, and I go into it more in the book, is the fact that memories started coming back. I literally had no recollection of childhood memories, of childhood stories. I mean, there's just like a door slammed at that point in my life. And so living in the moment really became a wonderful thing, because that's where I could live, because I couldn't live in the past. And I also decided that I wanted to challenge myself. I had a master's degree at this point because of teaching, but I decided I'm a fighter, and I decided I was going to get a PhD, because that would be the ultimate challenge, to see if I could make my brain work again. So I enrolled in an independent study PhD program through the Union Institute and University, and it was just a wonderful journey, my time there. Also set goals for yourself and challenges for yourself. So one of the challenges I decided to set for myself was to do a solo exhibition, because at this point I had never done a solo exhibition. I had been in group shows, and I thought, well, this would be a really good challenge for me to try to do it. And I had been spending a lot of time at the Rockefeller State Park Preserve, because it was near where I was living at that point. And they have a beautiful gallery on the grounds there. And I got up my courage one day and went in, and I asked them about how was it that you could go about doing a show. And so they were really open to it. I met with them, and we were able to set up to have a show. So that's where my first solo exhibition occurred, and it was actually part of my PhD work. The other part of my PhD work was to try to work on meditation. And that's where I discovered labyrinths, actually through a very dear friend who was actually one of my advisors on my PhD. And the labyrinths have played a really key role in my journey that I'm still on. And so you'll see that they reoccur. And I actually have a whole section in tree ratings about labyrinths, because they're just that important to me. And I think everyone can benefit from them. And that's what's so wonderful about Wisdom House with your time here, that hopefully you'll all get a chance to walk over to the labyrinth and take in not only the labyrinth, but just where it is. I couldn't pick a better location for it. You just get such a beautiful view out to the hills, to the trees, the sounds, the smells. You can hear the wind coming across the field before it even gets to the labyrinth. There's just so many wonderful things that happen there. So hopefully you all get a chance to do that. So this is a sampling of where some of my tree work was happening when I first started it. This was actually from the Rockefeller Preserve. It's called Story Time. And you open the chairs, and there's poems in there. One of the interesting things about my accident was, after my accident, I started writing poetry. I had never written poetry up until that point. And it was almost the best way I thought. And it was like, wow, this is really strange. But instead of like pushing it away, I decided to embrace it and really make it part of what I did. So a lot of my work actually started incorporating poetry. This is the tree lessons, which have appeared in a couple of different locations where they're actually installed out in the woods, and you can walk with them. There's a bowl that has a labyrinth in the bottom of it. I was doing a lot of photography initially. This is a black and white piece. I bought a beautiful wooden Zone 6 4x5 camera. You know, where you put the cloth over your head. I loved it because it's mandatory slowdown. You can't work fast with a large format camera. There's just no way. I mean, you load 2 negatives at a time. I mean, it's like, you know, it's the exact opposite of, you know, iPhone cameras. But I loved working with it because it really slowed my pace. And you had to really think about where you were going to go shoot and what you wanted to shoot, because the equipment itself weighed about 40 pounds to carry everything out. And I was generally traveling sometimes 2, 3, 4 miles to go shoot something. And I was carrying it all in a backpack on my back. So, and I would go out all year, all winter, everything, because some of my best shots I filmed in the winter shots. So I did a lot of photography. The picture up on the right was actually when I transitioned to digital. I'm kind of hoping to get a digital back for my 4x5. That's my ultimate dream, so I can go back and have my hands on that wood camera again. But I do charcoal drawings. These are encaustic pieces, and encaustics basically mean that you're using beeswax in some way, that you're melting, incorporating it. I love doing that to do kind of layering and attachment. So I've kind of done all of that. And a lot of times when people look at my work, they're like, wow, like, you know, you just don't do one thing. Like, you don't just do encaustics. You don't just do wood sculptures. And I always say, my response always is that it depends on what I need to say. And if I need to say it with a poem on a piece of gauze, then that's what I do. If I need to build something, then I do. So I don't know that I'll ever be easily classifiable, which makes it difficult a lot of times, especially if you're applying to certain shows. You know, they want to know exactly, well, what do you call yourself? And it's like, what? So, and that's the easiest answer I can give you, is that just the work has to kind of call me to it, to tell me